Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We have governments and we trust our governments all over. We feel and we have a hope that these governments are keeping trust of our happiness, of our resources. But it's shocking. The latest report by Fiscal Monitor shows that 90% of the governments are not aware. 90% are not aware of their assets. They are aware of the liabilities, but not of the assets. Imagine a household where you know about your debts, your mortgages, your credit card balance, your student loan. You possibly also know about how much cash you are sitting in the bank, the value of the home. But if you are not aware of all the investments, all the assets, what sort of a house you are running? And same is the case of the governments. When 31 countries are studied, their assets amount to $101 trillion. That is the combined GDP of those 31 countries. And the assets, the ratio is 1:219. Assets are 219% of the GDP. But unfortunately, as I said earlier, 90% of the governments are not aware of their assets. And since they are not aware of their assets, they cannot use them properly. They cannot husband them and manage them properly. And with the result, either they are squandering their assets or letting them go away. They are like the dead accounts in the bank. And as a matter of fact, if they really care about their assets and they know about that, according to this Fiscal Monitor, they can earn 3% of the GDP more in revenue every year and reduce all risks. That is almost as much as the governments make from the corporate income tax in advanced countries. And this money that they can earn without taxing the people can be used for building better schools, better hospitals, better infrastructure, and other priority spending. But few governments know how much they own. And it's what you own, not what you owe, that's important. They know what they owe to the others, but not what they own. And then, a beautiful thing emerges from this analysis, that those countries where they are aware the balance sheet, that the GDP and the resources are not equal, where GDP is lower than the resources, those countries are happy. The outstanding example of that is Norway, where the resources are at least 8 times more than their total GDP. And not only that, their assets, their resources, they are well documented. Now, you would be thinking that everybody is not possible. But do you know, for example, your resources can be your infrastructure, roads, bridges, even sewer pipes. But if you look at the budget of these governments, now compare that with Norway. When they prepare a budget, in the asset they say, okay, this much is on the sewage, this much on the road, this much has been depreciated, exactly like the corporations do. Then they know how much money they owe, how much the trade balance is there, how much payment is owed to them by individuals and businesses. But not other countries. Natural resources are also another part of the assets, and they say we are resource-rich countries, like Canada does. But do they know how they're squandering the resources? For example, here in Canada, oil is our largest product which can have a lot of commercial value. And we sell our oil at discount of $50 per barrel. Ontario has surplus energy. That's an asset. But instead of husbanding it properly, helping our people, we give it free of cost to USA. And not only we give it free of cost, we actually give them money to take our excess energy. Then leave the natural resources. They are, of course, the biggest asset. The assets are also the state-owned enterprises, public banks, and in many countries, utilities such as public electricity and water companies. You see, when the total liabilities are much larger than the debt alone, then it's a problem. And that is approximately 198% of the GDP, less than half of which is debt. Now, here is a comparison of what Trump is doing and what the liberal governments are doing. He is husbanding all the resources in a manner that the wages are rising, unemployment is decreasing. Normally, when the wages rise, it results in unemployment because the industries immediately and the business immediately throw out people. Here in Ontario, you remember when the minimum wage was raised, the unemployment also increased. But with the Trump policy, and that has been actually endorsed by Fiscal Monitor from Hong Kong. They said this is for the first time in an advanced country. But of course, they have taken in exception countries like Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, who are husbanding their resources in a manner which no other country is doing. Another part is the debt owed by the public corporations. Now, imagine, here in Canada, we have Canada Post. How much is the debt owed by the Canada Post? Nobody is aware. But that is actually owned by the nation. So when these public sector undertakings publish the balance sheets, the government budget doesn't take into account that. In India, at one time, railway budget used to be a part of the general budget. Not any longer. They were not sensible enough to understand that the income from railways should not only be for the railways. The same money, if it's transferred to the general budget, would automatically give you surplus of money and you won't have to levy taxes. And when you don't levy heavy taxes, then the people are happy. Subject to heavy taxes, provided they are otherwise happy. You look after people, you give them proper food, proper health, proper housing, and then they won't care even if you charge them 90% of their income as tax. But if you do not give them the basic comforts of life and then charge them tax, then there'll be resentment and hard burning. You see, most of the debt in these countries, when we talk of the debt and deficit, is owned by the public corporations. Most standard years of general government do not include the significant amount of the public debt, which is often classified as private debt. Now, in India, there are more than 100 public sector undertakings which are sick. There are also public sector undertakings which are very rich. But neither the sick undertakings are a problem, because while the rich undertakings do not transfer their funds to the government sector, the sick undertakings always take on from the government subsidies to sustain themselves. So there's a drain out of the resources, but there is no incoming stream of the resources. And that is where we falter. The World Economic Outlook shows that 47% of the GDP is augmented debt, debt on debt. You know, if you have a credit card and you don't pay the full amount, you might be paying 19% to 24%. The same is here. It's an accumulation, and that's why we call it augmented debt. Now imagine a country having excellent thing, but then the GDP is, say, increasing by 4%. In India, they said increase by 8%. But 47% of the GDP goes as augmented debt. So is it really the way we are progressing? No, it's the other way around. China has substantial government assets, and China has learned a lesson from Norway and other Scandinavian countries. Their years of high infrastructure investment show that their assets are many times more than their liabilities, putting net worth. And it's well above 100% of the GDP. Now that is important. Your net assets, if they are more than 100% of GDP, you are always an economy which you can be proud of. We need a buffer in our total assets to the public corporations, because considering that those public corporations also have assets. But the Chinese, what they have done is that even non-financial assets like buildings, roads, railways, they include. Even those countries like Canada, like India, which have created public sector undertakings and then let them go their way, but sustain the poor, those sick, non-performing assets. You know, when we go to a bank and we say it has a non-performing asset, we criticize the judgment of the bank. What about the non-performing assets of a nation where the governments are failing miserably? And you see, the recommendation always is that these public sector assets should act as a buffer so that the government can spend more public wealth on the upkeep, and it can face the recession much more happily, much more satisfactorily, and the people don't suffer. Actually, you know, if you are aware of all those assets and take proper care of them, then the impact of recession would be very minimal. Take Kazakhstan in 2014. It faced 50% reduction in the oil prices, slump in the external demand for the oil, and government it took only one step. It used part of its financial assets in national fund to help take the burden away from the falling oil prices. If Kazakhstan could do it, why is it that the national debt of countries like Canada, India is increasing? They are rich economies, and yet their national debt is much more, simply because they have not taken care of their real assets. All governments possibly can better manage their resources. Some countries are doing it. As I said earlier, Scandinavian countries are doing it. Japan is doing it. China is doing it in a big way. Then why can't other countries do it? It is because lack of innovation, and inertia. Their mindsets are basically in a state of coma. They do not look around. They'll go everywhere. It's like, you know, the ministers from India and Pakistan visiting these advanced countries, looking at the great things, but they never translate what these countries have done into their own countries. So what the governments can do is they can start bringing data together with a rough estimate of the public assets, liabilities, wealth. And over time, better accounting and statistical collection can improve the accuracy of these estimates, and then use them to do the basic balance sheet risk and policy analysis. And till today, I have not seen in Canada or in India that the budget has a risk assessment. Why is it that when we prepare a project report, techno-economic feasibility report for any undertaking, we have a full one chapter on risk analysis? Why is it the budgets of these big countries, I mean the whole nations, they don't have any risk analysis? And if they can have this, you can be sure that not only unemployment will be removed, not only the countries will progress, but it will be an integrated economy. Then the governments will be able to show to the citizens the full extent of what is the real asset of the country and what is the debt. And then they'll be able to use the public wealth to meet social goals and economic goals. Till then, they're all playing in the dark. They're working in the dark without any risk analysis, and that is only possible when you have a comprehensive assessment of your wealth, which you are not aware, and then husband that wealth properly. That way lies salvation, not any other way. Thank you.